God knows what type of damage and harm we might end up causing if we just put our minds into it.
This podcast.
Precisely.
Have a judgmental evening, everyone. This is the Flick Lab. Again, I'm Karri, and I have a co-host. He is...
Really quiet.
and Henrik.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Judge Dredd, 1995, versus, in some sense, Dredd from 2012, the sort of a remake. 2 movies made out of the original comics.
Yeah, the strong question which version is better and why it is the 1995.
Oh, well, yeah, we have different sides of different coins here.
Not necessarily at the end of it.
And I think at the end of it, the biggest discussion might not be so much about which one is better, so which one is better, but just what they contain as films, how we should interpret them. Then again, if we do interpret them the way that I'm going to interpret them, then you could also come at me and say that, hey Karri, why didn't you address this with the 100-something movies that we have already discussed? And that is fair, but I'm willing to go on a little journey tonight.
Okay, I can't wait to actually see where this road takes us.
Yeah.
Especially seeing how Judge Dredd here tonight kind of harkens back to some of the movies and episodes that we have done in the past. More specifically, especially to Dirty Harry episode and the discussion we had about the Robocop trilogy.
Yes, they do. Certainly to Robocop. Can you remind me how it relates to Dirty Harry?
Yeah. Well, actually, if something Dredd relates more closely to Dirty Harry than Robocop, at least on when it comes to kind of the driving idea behind the original artists of Dredd, which would be the comic book writer John Wagner.
Yeah, I think it's better to just give like a short overview of the movies and see where this road takes us. So, first of all, we do have the director Danny Cannon helming the first Judge Dredd 1995 version, a British director known for The Young Americans and some CSA episodes, and had some clashes with Stallone and the studio overtone on the movie. He wanted a darker and more clearly satirical take, but lost control in post. Disowned the final cut, called it a compromised version, whereas we have Pete Travis' Dredd 2012 version, known for at least Vantage Point, was reportedly removed from the editing process, where screenwriter Alex Garland effectively took over and is widely credited as the de facto director. So, yeah, Travis retained the official credit, but Garland shaped the film's tone and structure.
So it basically mirrors the 1995 situation.
Yes. Like no one seems to know, no one seems to have like a cohesive voice on how to do Judge Dredd, which is scary. Should I already go to my point? I'm not sure, but go ahead.
Well, it's kind of scary, but at the same time, it's really fascinating because in our previous episode we looked at Hannibal, a lecture on film. And that episode was 5 movies and 4 books. And in total it was, with the films and with the books, it was 6 artists in total taking different approaches on the same character. And Dredd is kind of as you already pointed out, it's kind of a similar type of situation. On surface, Dredd is 2 films and then a shitload of comics, with the comics mainly being authored by John Wagner. So that count would lead us to 3 different artists giving their interpretation of the same character. But like you pointed out, both of the film versions suffer from the fact that there was a force in the production. 1995 it was Stallone, and then in 2012 it was Alex Garland. So we are kind of at this point with the films we are looking at a certain type of a mishmash, a mixture of the original director's vision contrasted against the given film's kind of a background force. So we are also looking like 5 artists giving their own interpretation on the same character, that here being Judge Dredd.
Yeah, but that's not even the disturbing part here. But we can get to that. Shall we just say a couple of words about the cast first, unless you want to grab onto that disturbing already?
No, let's go with the cast first.
1995 version. Well, we have, as we in Finland call him, Sylvester Stallone playing Judge Dredd. Famous for, well, everyone knows, Rocky, Rambo, there's Cliffhanger, Demolition Man, and the list is long. But Stallone also adopts there, yes. Reportedly pushed to make Judge Dredd more of a comedic action film, which conflicted with the original intention of darker tone.
Yeah, back in the day, Stallone was dead set on the idea of getting Judge Dredd rated to PG-13. And he desperately tried to change the tone of the film and especially recut the film in a way that it would eventually be given the PG-13 rating, something that never actually materialized. Like when the film finally came out, if memory serves me correct, it was still PG-17. So in that sense, Stallone's meddling was unfruitful, contrasted to the goals that he had set for himself. Or as it has been theorized, set by the studio, in which reading Stallone so much is not the force who is out of just pure hubris sabotaging Canon's vision and the film, but someone who tries desperately to do the job that he believes the studio demands from him. Whatever this reading of Stallone's actions is true or false, well, that we can't ever know for certain. But there does exist these 2 different theories. The one where everything is just Stallone's fault, and the one where Stallone is trying to basically do what the studio is demanding of him, or what he believes the studio is demanding from him.
Okay, sounds completely clear and easy to understand what's going on.
Well, it kind of is, and it kind of isn't. Like, to look at Judge Dredd, you kind of also have to look at Stallone's career at that point. Stallone, in 1995, Stallone still was a major A movie star in Hollywood circles. Someone who had previously, as you mentioned, done Rocky, which was a film that he also wrote, and which gave him his only Oscar prize that he ever managed to gather in his career. But on top of that also, like 1995, Stallone was still feuding heavily with Arnold Schwarzenegger. They had this behind the scenes, and not all the time even behind the scenes feud, kind of an artistic battle where they both wanted to be the number one, the best action star in Hollywood, which resulted in a small number of conflicts between the two, the most famous of which being, I would guess, that moment in Schwarzenegger's comedy film Twins, where we have the scene where Schwarzenegger sees the movie poster for, was it now Rambo 2, and just laughs at it. And later on, Schwarzenegger directly sabotaging Stallone's career by spreading the false rumor that he was dead set and desperately wanted to do the comedy film Stop or Mom Will Shoot. These were driving Stallone to pull off all the stops and basically using all of the leverage that he has in Hollywood to snatch the movie for himself. And as we all know, Stop or Mom Will Shoot was a notorious comedic flop, and is still regarded as one of the worst comedy films ever made, and was a movie that really hurt Stallone's career at the time. So, coming from all of that, basically seeing Stallone in Judge Dredd and believing that Stallone would be extremely passionate to turn Dredd into a blockbuster money-making machine would kind of actually make perfect sense. Schwarzenegger himself had branched out of action genre and done a number of different genres, ranging from comedy to sci-fi movies, and had been hugely successful in his endeavor with films like Terminator and Total Recall. So coming from there, Judge Dredd being the Stallone's sci-fi vehicle would be kind of it would still lead into that feud between the two of them. Judge Dredd now being Stallone attempting to copy Schwarzenegger and also have a sci-fi movie under his name.
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, of which legendarily Sylvester Stallone said later on, "It was maybe one of the worst films in the entire solar system, including alien productions we've never seen."
And he is right on that sentiment. I mean, it is like Stop or Mom Will Shoot is borderline unwatchable.
Yeah.
Then again, when it comes to crimes against the history of cinema, Stallone is not alone here. I mean, we have to also remember that not shortly after Judge Dredd, was it 1997, when Schwarzenegger had his turn when making the film Junior, which also is completely unwatchable piece of trash.
We have also Armand Assante as Rico, Diane Lane playing Judge Hershey, Rob Schneider as Fergie, Max von Sydow as Chief Justice Fargo, and we do have Mitchell Ryan, veteran character from Lethal Weapon, Magnum Force, and you name it, funny thing from 80s or 90s on your local TV. When it comes to Dredd 2012, we can already cover that one as well in my books. Karl Urban, from some of the Lord of the Rings fame, playing Eomer, or however you pronounce that, played Billy Butcher in The Boys, was in the Star Trek reboot as Dr. McCoy, and he refused to remove the helmet throughout the film Dredd, which was winning some respect from the hardcore fans. Unlike Sylvester Stallone, who, for star recognition reasons, apparently refused to do that.
Yeah, then again, Stallone kind of does have a point in his stance.
Yeah.
Like, the fact is that, like, once again, 1995, Stallone was an A-list movie star, so they're really... When he stated that there is no reason to have him in the film if nobody's going to see his face, it kind of also rings somewhat true. Even though it is also, at the same time, it is true that it is a certain type of betrayal of the character, and I can fully understand why the fans of the comic book don't think too highly of this artistic decision.
Olivia Thirlby playing Judge Anderson, arguably providing the only real moral counterweight of the film. We can discuss that. Lena Headey playing Mama, the main antagonist. Wood Harris playing Kay, the nutjob. And then we have Domhnall Gleeson playing the clan Teki. That's pretty much the key characters from the films. So, are we ready to get to the bashing or the analysis part?
I don't really know why we should be bashing these movies. Heaven's sake.
No, let's be reasonable and argumentative and fair.
That's it. You are now just using alternative terms for bashing. but yeah. Go ahead. Let the bloodlust reign.
Okay, well, I was approaching this with a few terms in mind. One being utilitarianism, utilitarianism point of view of the film. So trying to kind of approach the film from a minimized suffering kind of standpoint. So, and also looking at what the US police force or what the US laws can do, and then comparing to what actually takes place in the movies, and also taking something from the international law. So an officer in the United States, he may not seize an unarmed, non-dangerous suspect by shooting him in the head, which kind of follows, but I think we see a little bit of that. International law likewise prohibits extrajudicial killings, the deliberate killing of individuals by state agents without judicial process. That's violating the fundamental right to life. There are treaties of many kinds. There are actions like torture of suspects, excessive force, or execution without trial. Those are explicitly illegal under both the US law and the international human rights law. To give an example, like the extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions, they are condemned as violations of the right to life in every major human rights agreement. So, put into that context, and obviously this is not only a Dredd problem, so this is what I dread about, no pun intended, about the discussion, because you might be coming on to me about this, but I'm just stating what is clearly on the table and is all over Hollywood machinery. But let's be Captain Obvious here anyway. Perhaps it would be time for Hollywood and the international action cinema to kind of take note of what kind of ideas we're willing to harbor for ourselves and our grandchildren, our kids, because what we have here, it's something that we are learning so many things from movies at a very young age, and then we normalize it in cinema. Yeah. It's okay to put a bullet in a guy's head if you think he's a bad man, or it's supposed to be somehow impressive if you shoot a bullet and that bullet is followed by a cool one-liner. So we're actually teaching kids, yes, fascism 101. And utilitarian argumentation. The, quote, the rightness or wrongness of an action is determined by the balance of good over evil produced by that action. So, given that how it's too much to ask for Hollywood to follow any law in movies or laws, it would be more fair for us to expect them to at least follow some kind of code of ethics. You'd think. Utilitarian code of ethics, for example, they do not. Not in Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd just simply shoots people, whether they pose an immediate threat or not. He will shoot on sight the people he sees as threats, deems as threats. So, torture, execution, all of this is normalized. This should require some very significant benefits, on the other hand, like saving of multiple other lives, for it to be justifiable ethically. But otherwise it's just deliberate harm that you see. Especially if you have someone who is restrained or could be dealt with in some less harmful way. But we have this ethical lens that we should follow, like some kind of quote-unquote absolute justice, which is the approach of Judge Dredd on the character. And he follows this as kind of like a hammer principle. He severely punishes with immediate violence towards the people in his vicinity. This also makes a like a proper mockery of any kind of a justice system. Whew. But so here we get to the paradox. The creators and the fans, they often appreciate that Judge Dredd is some kind of a critique of fascist tendencies as much as he might be some kind of a badass action hero. But how is this fascist tendencies criticism justified if we have a character who behaves in a fascist way, and this is something that the audience also sees as a protagonist clearly. The comics where I understand like more of a clearer critique of the absurd scenario here, where like in the story you have the police force who holds a very high level of power due to high level of corruption, and therefore this ultimate power of the police force. But the paradox is that the comics and the movies, they make the judge here as the protagonist. So you are rooting for him, and they just make him, for some reason, also like generic action hero who is supposed to be on the right side of law and ethics. And yeah, the audience agrees with this. So the character is a whole contradiction. So on one hand, you want to criticize fascism, and then you fail it on the movie side because it's not very clear. What you have in the end is a power fantasies. It's catering to the audience's fascist bloodthirsty power fantasies. That's what it is. And is it even surprising then that by extension that we have more behavior that corroborates with what we see in the real world? Authoritarian rule raising its ugly head. You can put it in the same checks and balances in my books.
So to take a note from our, or to take a line from our Whiplash episode, are you now calling for a pussification of action cinema?
Uh-huh. I honestly don't remember anymore very well the context there.
We were talking about what was it? J.K. Simmons's character Fletcher. Was it Fletcher?
Yeah, I think so.
The teacher in Whiplash.
Yeah.
And his teaching methods. And that was a discussion where me and I don't remember who was our guest in the episode.
Pat Smith.
Yeah, Pat Smith. We kind of strongly attacked against you when we were talking about in some moments of our discussion about Whiplash and about Fletcher's methods. So that's like the context for when you were. You said that you wanted to talk about the pussification of education. That's like the whole context from the snippet that I'm now stealing for the discussion here. But
yeah, I was never
really, man. Are you calling for a pussification of action cinema?
No. And just to give you a bit of a context there, dear listener, I was never there to glorify any violence, like in real world terms. Definitely not. But in terms of this movie, pussification of action, no, but I think there is an argument to be had, whether it would be like directly my opinion, but this is one way of looking at this once again.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it is justifiable that we promote these kind of, how else to say it, really fascist ideas on screen. And, it is kind of, it is power fantasy. It is action porn. It is showing on screen something that you are not supposed to do in real life, obviously. It is glorifying revenge, glorifying bloody revenge, glorifying summary executions.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently that is fine on the silver screen, and obviously it's not acceptable in the real world. And it's like I already said, it gets really blurry because these movies fail in so fundamental ways. What the comics apparently, which I didn't get to go to very deeply, I have to say, but these movies fail to be absolute parody of a fascist society, and therefore they raise several eyebrows on what the hell they're trying to do and what's the point they're trying to make, if any. My analysis would be that they are not intelligent enough, even unfortunately, to deliver the big guns, the big questions, and if they do deliver any questions, they don't have any answers.
I'm not 100% with you on when it comes to judging the movies on that merit. I do think that the movies are a thornier subject, and there are strong differences between the 1995 and the 2012 film, and I don't just mean the more comedic tone in 1995 and the more child-friendly presentation of violence in 1995 version. I do think that they are thematically, at the end of a day, very different. And I do think that when it comes to like calling into question these fascistic tendencies, even though, yeah, I do side with you, neither movie actually is a complete home run, I do think that the 2012 makes an somewhat meritable effort.
Well, the 2012 version, it was the one out of these that which clearly, at least at one point, tried to condemn the brutality when there was the gay characters beating. Anderson, the rookie, feels that this is not quite right, basically just by facial expressions, and then it's kind of left unresolved, except that she doesn't want to continue in the force, but the feeling is that it's just left unresolved, and it doesn't really expand upon story-wise from there. So it just kind of becomes audience's burden to interpret or kind of put it into context, but it just kind of raises questions there, but walks away and doesn't answer the question.
I don't know. I do think that it partly does. But, you know, we can try to look for the answers here tonight. At least partly because, you know, usually it's my job to be the limp-wristed lip on this podcast, and kind of offended that you come into my court playing my game here. And yanking the chain about all this fascism on silver screen and action cinema. So
yeah, it's popular nowadays. I can do that.
Yeah. Just to get you off from my end of this discussion and back to your own goddamn turf. I'm actually willing to take a deeper look at the films and try to see where they fail and what they try to say. And when it comes to the questions of fascism, and when it comes to the question of militarization of police, what answers do both of these films, and also what answers do the comics try to give you, or what answers they try to come to?
Yeah, please, because in my books it's just audience gratification and kind of self-cancels its point when it fails to be proper satire.
And that is a valid point. I don't think it's the only point, but that is a valid conclusion to come to.
Yep.
But to really, like Dredd films, they are one of the few times when I make recommendations on this podcast on what to watch. And I must say that must confess that because of that, I do have a bit of a home turf advantage when it comes to the conversation tonight. And I also already knew that talking about Dredd, especially talking about Dredd in our podcast, is going to be a more trickier question than it would actually at first glance appear to be. Because to really understand or to really talk about Dredd, we have to go quite the way back. Not just in the character's own history and creation, but also in terms of our own podcast.
Okay.
Because we do have to talk about couple of past episodes that we have done with Zach while he was still on the team.
Are you now hell-bent on finding contradictions that we have discussed some point in related to some other movie? And Henrik, there can be several points about even one movie, but maybe okay, I'll let you do the thing.
I'm not looking for contradiction. In fact, I'm doing completely the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our previous episodes, we have talked about depictions of American law enforcement.
No.
First, we looked at Dirty Harry franchise, and in that episode, we talked about how the American image of the police changed in American pop culture. How the cops on silver screen, they changed from the sweet and funny small-town cops to the almost villains of the film noir era, and eventually landed on the still existing archetype of a lone maverick cops like Dirty Harry. And then we looked at RoboCop trilogy, a more critical text about the dehumanizing effect of the militarization of law enforcement and the business motives behind such trends. And then we have Judge Dredd here, which is kind of the last horse on this trifecta that has kind of a foot on both camps. It's between Dirty Harry and it's between RoboCop. In fact, it's so deeply between RoboCop that Paul Verhoeven himself has officially stated taking a lot of inspiration for RoboCop from Dredd comics.
Okay, not surprising at all.
Yeah, and therefore, like with Judge Dredd now, I do think that when it comes to us kind of having some type of a trilogy of conversations, and in saying this, I do realize that, well, we perhaps should have asked Zach to possibly join us for this episode. But we kind of conclude a certain type of circle. Dredd is at least on his comic book form. And then we can talk about the movies later on, but at least as a comic. Dredd is a direct criticism and a reaction to Dirty Harry films, while removing the capitalistic aspects that were in the heart of RoboCop movies, and focusing solely on the effects of militarization of law enforcement, and kind of this lone maverick asshole cops, which Dirty Harry presented.
So you're just drawing a comparison here, or are you saying that this was directly with something like Dirty Harry in mind created as a character, Dredd?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to actually, like, to explain what I mean by that, we actually have to look at comics before Judge Dredd. We have to look at the original proto-Dredd, which would be John Wagner's previous comic book character, One-Eyed Jack. The comic One-Eyed Jack, it came out following the first two Dirty Harry movies.
Okay. And
it ran from 1975 to 1976. The first Dirty Harry came out 71 and the second one came out 73. And even though Wagner hasn't ever like outright went and said like, or I didn't find an interview where he would have said that, yeah, I watched them Dirty Harry movies and that inspired me to do One-Eyed Jack. But I do think that the comparisons are too strong in One-Eyed Jack to make the case that it would have been a completely different or separate character from the ideas that Dirty Harry movies presented.
Yeah, I don't remember if you discussed fascism in the RoboCop episodes, but we definitely had that as a central theme in the Dirty Harrys, so you're definitely right about seeing this as a trilogy of things.
Yeah, and I do think that it also applies the One-Eyed Jack character when it comes to like the criticism of fascism that is inherent to Dirty Harry's character.
Yeah.
Because what One-Eyed Jack was, and I know that you didn't read One-Eyed Jack comics, because pretty much nobody knows or remembers One-Eyed Jack anymore. But One-Eyed Jack was a Scottish take on American cop archetype. And in the stories, Wagner proceeds to absolutely fuck up the whole archetype presented by Dirty Harry. The comic's main character, Jack McBain, he's presented to you as your average by-the-book cop until he gets injured in the line of duty and losing his left eye, Jack decides to still remain in the force, but he now becomes downright psychotic, preferring to intentionally kill his opposition in basically every comic book adventure that I could find. And as Jack states in the comic book himself, I was a good cop, I played by the book for 10 years, but not anymore. And from Jack's brand of brutality, it takes place on... In the comics, it is said that it takes place on the streets of New York, but the way how New York is being presented in the comics, it's more of an absolute war zone. There's basically a terrorist attack or a Die Hard 3 tier bombing, well, pretty much in every Sunday. And Jack himself is a superhuman cop, a lone maverick, just like Dirty Harry, who does inhuman feats constantly, and is basically just motivated by his bloodthirsty lust to kill any degenerate that just comes into his view. In that sense, his chase of the killers is very much the same way like what we saw from Dirty Harry, for example, in the first film, where he tortures the sniper and later on pushes him to a breaking point and forces him into a final shootout, just so that he can get a quote-unquote legal permission to kill the bad guy at the end of a film. That's very much is also Jack McBain's whole motive of operation. But following Valiant, the original anthology comic book series that published One-Eyed Jack, it went on under in 1976, and it was followed by a new British anthology comic, which was called 2000 AD. And in order to separate itself from the other British comic competition, 2000 AD needed a hero. It needed some type of a frontline comic that would be even edgier than anything else that was on the market at that point. And it was during this time that John Wagner then ditched One-Eyed Jack, and he created a new character where New York City, or where Wagner, he ditched the contemporary setting of One-Eyed Jack, switched it to sci-fi. New York was switched to Mega City 1, cops were switched to judges, and One-Eyed Jack McBain was renamed as Dredd. This way, kind of which was even more extreme than what Jack McBain was. And this way, Wagner in comic books kind of brings the archetype of Dirty Harry and One-Eyed Jack to its kind of a logical end point. The most brutal and the most violent, and at the same, and also like the most torture-happy cop that you can have on page. Yeah. And I am, of course, like I am oversimplifying the publication history of Judge Dredd here. I am also somewhat simplifying John Wagner's intentions, but as Wagner himself has stated, the lessons I learned from One-Eyed Jack played no little part in the creation of Judge Dredd.
Lessons such as ? Because this also sounds like, yeah, well, I have a pretty good subject here. I will take the archetype of a American cop, let's say, and I just want to put it on a comic and see what happens, and this makes for good entertainment. But I don't think there's any learning here to do. It's not out there to make a point, except that this is entertaining, and therefore we get again into the action porn side of things.
That's actually a side where I disagree with you rather strongly. I get your point. I get your coming, like the viewpoint where you are coming from. But this, in my opinion, is the moment where a kind of reading the Judge Dredd stories starts to pay off. And later on, it pays off when analyzing the movies themselves. Because with 2000 AD and Judge Dredd magazine and other side comics that now form the Judge Dredd comic book canon, there's something like closer to 3,000 issues of Judge Dredd comics, spanning something of tens of thousands of pages. And reading all of that material would take you years. So reading all of that in a time span of 2 weeks in a preparation for one podcast episode, that is an undertaking way too stupid even for this podcast. But you kind of have to read some Judge Dredd.
Some Judge Dredd. You're not saying not word of 2 or 3 years of Judge Dredd or extended universe Judge Dredd. But what then, after all of this experience of yours, would you say, if I could ask, what is there some kind of a moral story here to be learned from Judge Dredd?
In my opinion, yeah, but it's a tricky one to find, or it's not something that you find immediately.
Would you also agree that that's Judge Dredd's main point, or just like an added value?
I do think it's main point.
Okay.
If you read, for example, like Wagner's first ever story arc that was published under the Judge Dredd label, it's not the first Judge Dredd story ever. There were a couple of writers who wrote Judge Dredd individual Dredd stories before Wagner made his first, but Dredd still is Wagner's character. So if we look at what John Wagner wrote, his first story arc is a robot called Robot Wars. And in Robot Wars, the robots of Megacity 1, they become sentient. They start a rebellion against humans' cruel treatment of their kind. And this rebellion, it's basically is from the robot's side. It's a call for basic human rights and some type of acknowledgement of their individuality and kind of their identity. That's what the robots in the end are demanding in Robot Wars. But the rebellion for basic human rights does not sit well with Dredd, who quickly deduces that the reason behind the rebellion is that the robots have been given too many human traits, leading up to them self-developing, as Dredd puts it, the other human trait, evil. And then Dredd proceeds to crush the whole rebellion by brainwashing his own robot army and killing the robot's leader. And in this story, Dredd repeatedly takes an extremely nihilistic view of humanity, where it argues that humans are at their core, they are evil and greedy. Compassion, tenderness, love, and other positive features of human behavior are not human traits in Dredd's eyes. They are traits that humans force themselves to live by if threatened with strong enough force. In other words, the judge's right to execute and imprison you on the spot. And this is kind of a running throughout Judge Dredd himself in Judge Dredd comics. So on the surface level, Judge Dredd is easy to see as a fascist text. That's very much what happens in Robot Force.
I think it's very much what happens with the movies, but your take on comics is probably spot on.
Yeah. I don't know if it's spot on, but it's my take. Because if you read more Judge Dredd comics, you come to understand that Judge Dredd in fact is an anti-fascist comic, at least in my opinion. Yes, the Justice Department depicted in Dredd stories is a fascist regime, and Justice Department wins every time. Yes, Dredd himself is a fascist character, and the comics repeatedly ask you to sympathize with Dredd.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of on the surface text of Dredd stories.
Okay.
On the subtext, the comic argues that Dredd and the Justice Department are, at the end of the day, they are at the wrong here. This is something that can be most strongly, in my opinion, seen in stories like A Letter for a Democrat or America, where Dredd himself uses blackmail, torture, sleeper agents, electroshock lobotomization, facial disfigurement, and later on deportation to penal colonies for the simple crime of trying to actually advocate for democracy in Megacity 1. And it's not even like that the democratic process couldn't work in Megacity 1. The point is clearly made, especially in the storyline Letter for a Democrat, that the reason why the Justice Department so strongly opposes democracy as a concept is because it opposes the tyrannical rule of the judges. The head judge in that storyline makes that directly clear that democracy has to be squashed in Megacity 1 so that the judges won't lose their place in the society. And in doing so, the comics end up arguing that authoritarian and fascist states are not in the best interest of the common folk. Because as Dredd himself puts it in one story, 800 million people and every one of them potential criminal, which kind of highlights Dredd's and Justice Department's whole view of humanity. And what that drives as a larger point is that what it establishes, that worldview of humanity, that humans are automatically bad, evil, and every one of us, you, me, your mom, your next door neighbor, everybody is a potential criminal. What it also establishes is that in draconian police states, like the one presented in Dredd comics, unless you are part of the chosen minority, the rule of the judges, you are automatically part of that 800 million people and therefore a potential criminal. So therefore anyone who would champion the word of Judge Dredd, anyone who, if I would, go into the streets and absolutely believe that, what we need is a Judge Dredd type of a police state, I would be a complete jackass, because I wouldn't be one of the judges, I would be the potential 800 million, part of the 800 million potential criminals, and therefore I would be just like one step away from being put down by a headshot, or facing, as the 1995 film presents, a 5-year sentence in a penal colony for the selfish act of trying to preserve my own life where there's a fucking block war going on.
Just to keep yapping on about this whole fascism, what do you think the reader will most enjoy about Judge Dredd, or take home from Judge Dredd? Would it be that, hey, this is cool that this guy is busting their heads off, killing them in all these imaginative ways, and the whole revenge porn aspect, or the fantasy aspect of it, or some kind of fascism is bad? Yeah, that's it.
That's like
Well, of course, it's entertainment.
you no.
No?
That's actually a valid question. Don't downplay it by stating that it's just entertainment.
Okay.
Because that's a big question. I'm not like I wasn't staggering because I was disagreeing with you. I was staggering because that's like one episode on its own. Of course, what I would hope, what I wanna believe on myself and the man next to me, is that he will look past at the surface level text and he will also understand the subtext, and from there come to conclusion that, hey, fascism is bad and we should do everything in our capabilities to avoid a futuristic state like depicted in Judge Dredd. However, as we talked about in our last episode, we talked about the adaptation problem and the presentation problem. In that episode, it was in relation to trans people and the depiction of trans folks given in Silence of the Lambs, and how the stereotype of Buffalo Bill kind of overshadowed and overlived the author's intention to point out that Buffalo Bill was not a trans person, and therefore Buffalo Bill's crimes are not depicting of what trans people are like. They tried to make that point, as we discussed, but at the end of the day, what people took away from Silence of the Lambs was that trans people are like Buffalo Bill. And we also talked about American History X, which faced the same type of problem. At the heart of it, it's a story that wants to argue strongly against neo-Nazism, being a film that comes from a Jewish director. So obviously, it's not American History X is not a neo-Nazi film. But here comes the problem. We movie audiences, we have two gifts when we approach movies. The first one is that we kind of understand the concept of an unreliable narrator. We understand that in everyday life, if it's raining outside, but I tell you that it's sunshine, I'm obviously lying to you. We don't always need what we mean, what we say, and the same also therefore applies to fiction. In fiction, a character can say one thing while at the same time meaning something else. And the audiences understand this. And at the same time, we have the gift of sympathy that we often lend to movies. This is something that eventually also affected American History X. It's a movie that is depicted, even though it criticizes neo-Nazism and means to show you the harm that comes from neo-Nazi ideas and principles, but it's also a story that is being told from the perspective of an ex-neo-Nazi, and it's not something that rubs in your face basically the damage that the neo-Nazis and our main character, when he was still part of the Nazi, when he himself still was a Nazi, caused to other people. And because of that, we can kind of sympathize with the main character, and through with him, we can also at least partly sympathize with the neo-Nazis in the film. And where that led us was into a situation where real-life neo-Nazis could take the movie American History X and look at it from the perspective where it spoke to them and reinforced their worldview, to a point where these days one neo-Nazi band, was it now Redneck 28, made an actual song from the snippet or couple of line of lyrics that was sang by a fictional from a fictional neo-Nazi song sang in the movie American History X. So we have kind of so we have the message of, hey, don't do hate crime, that later on can be recuperated by some factions of society to mean, hey, do hate crime, it's cool. And that's also something that, like you asked, what is the takeaway that audiences will take from Judge Dredd movies or the comics? Well, fuck me, that's where we are in problem. Like, of course, I would prefer that everybody would take the lesson. Don't advocate for fascist dictatorships, doofus. But at the same time, it can be recuperated into a lesson. Hey, Judge Dredd is a cool guy. We need more cool guys. And police enforcement should be even stronger than it is today.
No, I would even say when it comes to American History X, going on a side tangent again here, but anyway, for the moment, just to say that the way that the film ends itself, the final conclusion, and the conclusion that the characters land on, the way that they land on it, the, I would say, relative ease with which they land on it, the way that the whole events unfold there so quickly, I could believe that if you were a neo-Nazi or would have some lingering tendencies of that sort, I mean, you might even look at the movie and say that, was this neo-Nazi positive encouragement here?
Mm-hmm. and that's the takeaway that they take. Like I've heard this statement that what American History X really is, and this is coming from a neo-Nazi perspective, it is actually like, it is this sub-messaging masterpiece that is meant to trick the Hollywood Jews and slip past them the message that black people are not really people. The argument goes that at the end of the day, what American History X does, it presents the black people as unreasonably violent people, and it hammers down the point that the main character Derek gets his basically his karmatic reward when his little brother is being shot for the crime of giving those subhumans the benefit of a doubt. That is kind of like the reading that side of the coin takes from the film.
Something that both the Dredd movies and RoboCop movies might have missed as an opportunity is giving like an actual proper sentencing of a person on the fly, but in a way that it's not necessarily death sentences, but capturing the enemies and then providing on the fly some absolutely valid sentences. Like in the case of RoboCop, this could be like, this would make sense if since he's like a robot kind of thing, or sort of a AI, then the RoboCop would do this stint. Like the way that it stands now with RoboCop, it's kind of the same stint that it's catering to the audience fascist bloodthirsty power fantasies. But what it could have done differently here, it would have just taken like a more neutral approach, would have actually taken what machines could have done, which is hopefully given valid sentencing with less effort than humans need to do. You have to go to a courthouse, yada yada yada. We be able to, using machine intelligence to give the verdict in a couple of minutes, for example. But that would of course mean that there would not be this level of violence or killing people in these fantastical ways. They would just be, in most cases, captured, if not presenting an imminent threat.
Yeah, and what is kind of like to once again that's a tough statement to approach, because in one way, if we now look at like the first RoboCop film, Just, and then we look at the concept of Judge Dredd, in both of these cases, the valid sentencing and valid judgment is kind of out of the window automatically. In Judge Dredd, that is because, that the whole society has crumbled and we now live in the Megacity 1 and everything else is a nuclear wasteland, and therefore, what we have is this shitty police state of the judges. In RoboCop, that is because RoboCop himself, at the end of the day, is not a free individual.
He's not a free individual. It's just, in a way, it's a shame. I don't know which would be the right venue to put out these kind of ideas that I suggested, but because people are flawed, then RoboCop would have been the one that would not have been the actual extension of the human evil, but would have actually gotten things judged correctly.
Then again, RoboCop, and once again, just talking in the context of the first film, because the rest of the films make this murkier, but in the first film, RoboCop is just the extension of the OCP, which is the corrupt corporate overlord ruling over the new Detroit.
Good point.
That film has. And therefore, RoboCop kinda has no chance of doing proper justice, because what he can do is only what OCP tells him to do.
But ultimately, he has more of a free mind in the series.
Ultimately, perhaps, yeah. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Well, I would say, but in part 3, he openly rebels up against OCP, and it's whatever were the Spartan troops that OCP utilized. But at the same time, what happens in RoboCop franchise is that it's a franchise that actually tries to tackle, or it doesn't try to tackle, but it takes a look at the points that you raised. Like, for example, RoboCop 2 has the moment where some notion of a possibility of RoboCop doing things by the book is being addressed. However, RoboCop 2 takes the notion that would be an absolute joke, and we most definitely shouldn't do that. That being the moment when the OCP suits have gathered in the one meeting room to talk about all the hundreds of new restrictions and orders that RoboCop would follow. And as we saw in the film, that led into an absolute disaster, and that's kind of the point that RoboCop 2 does. And later on, when you talked about the possibility of showing RoboCop using the machine AI to reach into a judgment fastly, well, that is something that the RoboCop remake doesn't openly do, but an concept that it kind of toys with. The remake has those moments where RoboCop automatically accesses the criminal database of Detroit PD, then face scans the entire crowd and automatically, like, in 5 seconds recognizes that, hey, that man in the crowd is a criminal and will arrest that person. It's not what you were exactly aiming at, but it's kind of a toying with a similar type of a concept. RoboCop using machine AI to be a better police. But at the same time, like, also in remake, when it comes to criticizing OCP and when it comes to kind of having the same criticism of the society and criticism of capitalism that was in the heart of the first Paul Verhoeven's first film, the remake pretty much goes completely opposite way, and in the end just argues that OCP could, as long as we just got that one dickhead out of a CEO position. And that's kind of also like a problem that can easily exist with media. Much like already with American History X, but the criticism of recuperation can easily become a tool for recuperation, especially when we get into the world of sequels and when we are starting to build franchises, whenever RoboCop is being directed by someone else than Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah.
So the point at the core of RoboCop can easily be lost when Frank Miller writes the character. All of a sudden, it's teen police against Tin Man, Truck Kingpin, and Robot Bad. Or, as in Robocop 3, I don't know, the Japanese bad and something OCP.
Yeah. The 1995 version of Dredd, it's such a stylistic hodgepodge. It's a mess. And therefore that the whole problem of the argumentation of what it wants to do is even higher than in the remake in some ways. But this is kind of like what one might call like negation without negating, like media that imitates critique while at the same time it's reinforcing the thing that it pretends to criticize. Mm-hmm. And that ends up being my problem with both of the movies. And 1995 is really not doing a good job if it tries to be some kind of a critique of fascism or authoritarianism, but then ends up having a kind of slapsticky humor or an added comedic character and having its stylistic sense all over the place. But then
I on the other hand, I really did like, I love the visuals in 1995.
Yeah.
Judge Dredd. I love the sets, and I loved the moments that we spent in Megacity 1. To me, the problem lies elsewhere. It's not even the comedic tone of the film, because the comics also are, at times they are really heartbreaking, and at times they are extremely comedical. There was a like the problems that Dredd has had to deal with in comics has been stuff like ugliness being a fashion trend and fat people. Yeah. So the comic has these notions of comedy, and therefore, as much as I hate Rob Schneider, and I hate his character Fergie here, but I don't think that Fergie itself is the core problem. Looking at the core problem in 1995 film, I have you 3 examples.
Okay.
The first one is the character of Rico. Rico is a character from the comics, where he is Joe Dredd's cloned brother. But in the comics, Rico becomes a criminal out of his own free will. Rico rationalizes and argues that the rule of the judges is so draconian and so arbitrarily cruel that there really is no real difference between being a judge and being a criminal. So he chooses to become a criminal. Mm. In the film, Rico is criminal because, he got all the crime genes. My second example would be as the moment when Chief Judge Fargo is talking about the crime situation in Megacity 1 and what should be done with it. The other judges point out that the crime is actually constantly rising in Megacity 1. Whatever it is that the judges are doing isn't working. There's just more and more crime. And they think that they are contemplating on taking even more drastic measures to deal with the problem of criminality. And Fargo can't remember the statement from word to word, but he says something in the tone of, if I am to retire, let it be not be so that, or let it be so that I retire after serving an institution that advocates for freedom. And I don't remember how it goes exactly. Or to reverse the film a bit, what he says from word to word is that, my fellow judges, I was barely in my teens when I put on this badge. When the time comes for me to take it off, please let me do so, knowing that it still stands for freedom. That's what, word from word, what Fargo says in the film. In the comic America, where Judge Dredd once again deals with those evil Democrats and makes damn certain that democracy will never come to Mega City 1. There's also a quote where Dredd states that justice has a price. The price is freedom. In the comic books, for the judges, freedom is a curse word. In the 1995 film, Fargo states that the judges and the badges they wear stand for freedom. And my final example, my third example, is the ending of the film. So Dredd has just killed Rico, has cleared his name, and is getting back to the streets because he's a street judge. And Fergie is being treated by the medics in the wayside. Now, two notions about the ending. The first one being that Fergie in the film, in no point has Fergie been paroled for hacking the vending machine and at the beginning of the film, and therefore his 5-year sentence is still standing from that crime. So when he's now carried to off-screen at the end of the film, after being shot while helping Dredd to defeat Rico, if keeping true to the spirit of Dredd, especially the comics, Fergie is not being carried home, he's being carried off to prison to serve his 5-year sentence. And the second problem that I have with the ending is that, much like Robocop, Dredd and Robocop, they are both power fantasies. And they came out during the time period when 70s and 90s criminal, or the comic Judge Dredd and the first Robocop, they came out when criminal scaremongering was fueled all-time high by Presidents Nixon and Reagan, which led into more totalitarian laws in US, was kind of the birth of the militarization of the police force and eventually led into an all-time high rate of prison sentencing. And I was really quite shocked now when I saw the 1995 ending of the film, where we have where the status quo at the presented to us in the beginning of the movie is being reinforced and reinvigorated as Dredd returns to duty, and there is surrounded by the thunderous applause of the cheering public, while Fergie is also, once again, keeping true to the tone of the Dredd stories, would be ferried off to prison. So in the end of the film, it's almost like the 1995 version is arguing that the actual rulership of the judges and the Justice Department is somehow sound and good.
Yeah.
Dredd throws Rico down from the was it now the head of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And coming from that point, simply because Dredd killed the bad guy, apparently all of a sudden everything is hunky-dory as the film's ending states. That the audience, the common folk, has gathered to the streets to applaud Dredd as he returns back to duty. There is no actual change being done to the way how the society operates in the film by the end of the movie. The crime rate is still rising. The dictatorship of the judges has still failed because no change has been done. All Dredd has done is throw Rico out of the bloody window, and that's it. So there is no major change to the society, but at the same time, even though by all logic that should be like a dramatic ending, that should be a bad thing, business continues as usual. And in Dredd's case, that is a fascist dictatorship. But still, the film has like this thunderous applause and the upbeat music, and it's like heroic ending that it grants to us. And that, in fact, to me, that was the biggest shock. that I got from the 1995 version.
Still to your Rico point, what I would just say is, perhaps stating the obvious, but stating it anyways, the fact that Rico is such an archetype villain character, and no matter how much he might have beef against the rule of law, he shouldn't be doing all these nefarious tasks and trying to impress his brother with these new monsters that would be able to lead the force in some sort of a better way. Obviously not better way. Look, brother, I made all these really shitty monsters, and why are you not loving me? Blah, blah, blah.
I don't actually know. Like, obviously, Rico is... He's a bad guy. And therefore, Rico is not any type of a freedom fighter of the proletariat or anything like that. So, Rico winning at the end of the film, that would be also bad news. But Rico's actions of killing judges, well, that we can actually debate. Would that really be such of a bad thing when we are dealing with democracy-hating fascists?
Yeah, well, more like, well, what it seems to me is that you have this group that is fascists, and then the guy who is fighting against the fascists is also something even worse than the fascists themselves. Mm-hmm. So being against it doesn't automatically mean that you would be offering something better. You are just some other extremity.
No, and to be clear, in the film and also in the comics, Rico is not any kind of a poor man's freedom fighter. Yeah. He is a criminal, and what he's after is his own personal gain. In the film, Rico wants to become some type of a dictator who now introduces complete anarchy to Megacity 1 or something. He wants to clone himself 15 million times to do some shit. We don't know what, but obviously it's nothing good.
Yeah. So
no, Rico is not someone who should win the story either. I'm merely thinking that, I don't know if we would have like, I don't know, Jake Paul, Rico something, and he would go and gun down some judges. Would that actually be good for the society of the Judge Dredd? Like an actual democratic freedom fighter killing judges, could that be a crime that in the end could be justifiable? Or if not justifiable, still be seen as a net positive?
If it's a freedom fighter, then could be a net positive, as long as the means are such that they are representing or are within the definition of a freedom fighter, therefore not targeting civilians, which would be then terrorism.
Possibly, yeah. Then again, at the same time, a lot of it would kind of be extremely dependent, or keeping that restriction of not hurting civilians. It would mean that you would have to choose your forms of aggression extremely carefully. You couldn't, for example, use bombs. Or if you could only bomb like the Justice Department headquarters, because even if you wouldn't intend it to happen, a bomb, for example, on a street level can have an unintentional collateral damage, which could be civilian pedestrians. In the film, Rico explodes Hershey's bike in that one scene. Okay, in the film, nobody gets hurt, not even Hershey herself. But once again, like put into a real life situation, that is something where civilians could have been caught by the blast or the shrapnel.
In the strictest sense, if they would be able to guarantee that there would not be civilian casualties, if they would not be targeting civilian casualties, then there might be an argument there that it's still not terrorism. It's
always tricky. It's always tricky when violence is introduced to the equation. Because it would still actually, it would be terrorism, it would still be violence with a political motive that would try to reach some type of a political outcome.
It is also, to an extent, a point of view situation. Like who will be the one to say that hey, these are freedom fighters and not just people who are trying to take control of your government for no good reason at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would have to judge the merits or what's their end goal. Blah blah blah.
That is a card that the judges play in the comics when they go and mass arrest and beat up a bunch of peacefully demonstrating Democrats.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really hard to actually say that who can, in the end, can go and throw the first rock, and who can go and throw around the argument that type of that is trying now to overthrow this government and we can't accept it. Dredd himself abuses that clause repeatedly in the comics. But that, in my opinion, is one field where the 2002, once again, in my personal reading, actually differs from the 1995 version. I understand fully the criticism that you gave towards the 2012 film previously. And I'm not saying that you are wrong in your reading, because the film most definitely can, once again, it can be seen as a glorification of violence and glorification of Dredd as an absolute badass, and therefore a reinforcement of the idea that cops like Dredd are super badass and therefore good, and the Justice Department or the society that they present could somehow be acceptable. That's basically completely valid reading to take from the 2012 movie, because you are repeatedly in the film, like you pointed out, you are being asked to cheer for the moments where Dredd uses force and mangles the bad guys.
And at the same time, I fully realized that this could be a point that could be discussed about almost any Hollywood action movie.
Mm-hmm. And it is also a point that the bad guys in 2012 Dredd, outside of like one hesitant family man who still tries to shoot the judges, that being the first guy that Anderson executes in the film, everybody else in the movie is completely unredeemable, degenerate, and a horrible human being, and we can easily argue that the world would be a better place without them in it. Mobbing the absolute worst of the bunch, and that's kind of a tall order with the shitbags that we have in the movie. And once again, my own personal reading, and this is not a strong point in the film, but there are two moments that I do think that kind of brings the 2012 version closer to the comics. The first one is the overall attitude, the mean-spiritedness, the nihilism of the film, where for me it felt like that the word of Judge Dredd there is a rather unfortunate hellscape. Once again, it's not a strong point to hang any kind of a statement that 2012 film is somehow anti-fascist, but I took it that the film didn't glamorize the society that they were all living in. It was constantly grimy, it was constantly dirty, it was... Everybody had a real casual approach towards violence and death, even when it approached them. So everybody had become really apathetic towards death and violence. And the facial recognition was going on absolutely everywhere, all the time. My second point, and to me, my second point would be the ending. And this is where I do think that 2012 does something that 1995 absolutely did not. It's an extremely small detail, but as the film points out, Anderson has failed her assessment if she is fit to be judge in course of the film when she loses her side she loses her firearm. So according to all the logic and rules, when the chief judge asks from Dredd, is Anderson pass or fail? Dredd should say fail, but he says pass. And for me, that signaled that, especially after seeing that his own partners and colleagues at Justice Department can easily be bribed and can easily become corrupted, Dredd himself kind of takes a step back from his absolute die-hardest approach to law and regulations when he lets Anderson pass, and in a sense even lies to his superior, the chief judge, when he stays quiet about the fact that Anderson kind of fucked it up at one point of the assessment. And from there, one can see that at the end of the film, the movie argues that Dredd has changed. Not necessarily that much, just a tiny, just a itchy-bitty change in his core beliefs, where he now sees that perhaps the system, or at least the actors in that system, them being the other judges who can become corrupted and be bribed, are not perhaps absolutely perfect, and perhaps are not of such quality that they shouldn't in the end change. The 2002 film does not end in a notion where Dredd acknowledges strongly that the society should change and the Justice Department should change somehow. But to me, it ends with a note where it leaves open just a tiny door that in the future Dredd may start a process of change inside the Justice Department. He now takes his first step when he lets Anderson pass. Perhaps tomorrow he does not, sentence just a homeless vagrant to 5 years or to 5 years on ISO cube. Perhaps day after tomorrow he can understand that there may be some extrajurificational reasons for someone to be a criminal, and perhaps those reasons should be taken into account when addressing a sentence to that person. Perhaps next week he won't automatically execute someone for a minor violation. No promises given at the end of the film, but I saw that there was a possibility.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a hell of a lot stronger note than what the 1995 version gave to us.
Yeah, at least it gave us something to ponder at the end of 2012. I also noted that okay, could have gone either way. Pass, no pass. But it's a pass. And therefore, I'm kind of undermining the system, for better or worse here.
Mm-hmm. Now, how good that undermining is, or how strong it is, that we do not know.
This whole conversation, or thinking about these two movies, has kind of made me realize this larger difference in culture when you compare Hollywood action movies to some other, perhaps European action movies, that when you look a couple of generations or a couple of decades back, when there wasn't such a strong Hollywoodification, if that's a word, of the European cinema, you could see that I think there wasn't this kind of extrajudicial and summary execution style of killing on screen as blatantly as it is now all over the planet. And this would, in my anecdotal view, has split the audiences before. like our parents or the parents of our parents, they, in my opinion, they very often didn't like these moments where some kind of these sudden summary executions would take place, and they would gravitate more towards something more just, coming perhaps from the UK cinema or something like that. But the more this kind of American style has creeped into even the UK cinema, then I feel that it has changed something. That it seems that the older generation is letting go of some of their franchises or film series at that point.
America is, we have talked about this in the past episodes also, but America is, the fact is that America is the largest cultural exporter in the world. And like you yourself also stated tonight, the media we consume can have a hell of a strong effect on how we start to see the world.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, like partly you can see this, in my opinion, in American society. I don't remember the exact statistics here, but if memory serves me correct, most of the American police, for example, they get to go through their careers without ever actually firing their sidearm in the line of duty. But when you look at the American cop cinema or cop media, it's basically a firefight every week.
Yeah.
This week's shootout. And at the same time, we touch upon the concept of propaganda, which is, well, in its softest form means the depiction of law enforcement in media. And in its harder depiction means propagandistic depiction or pro-cop propagandistic depictions in media. And this is something that has a strong history in American pop culture, or originating from all the way from, was it now 60s, when shows like Dragnet started to air on American TVs, where it was one of those shows where the police departments actually went through and accepted the scripts that were filmed for the show, and could at any time demand changes to be made in the scripts if they felt that the script depicted the cops in a way that was not okay with the police force. From those origins, we have a hell of a long road all the way, as stated, to bloodthirsty maverick cops of like Dirty Harry, and the showing green light to torture, an archetype that even today exists, for example, in 24's Jack Bauer, who also shoots everybody he feels like and tortures your next door neighbor if he just feels like it today. And those depictions, they do have an effect on the way, like, on us, the audiences, and what we in the end up accepting. I kind of feel that I see this in Finland when we are getting the more militaristic gearing of the Finnish police. Finnish police officers, most of them won't see a firefight ever in their lives, but they still have MP5s at the back end of the squad cars. And even though Finnish people, we famously don't even know how to protest or riot, believably. Just compare a Finnish protest to what you have in France or Spain or what have you. It's extremely mild. Yet our cops feel increasing necessity to have absolutely bulletproof cars. Because, you and I, we are such dangerous individuals. God knows what type of damage and harm we might end up causing if we just would put our minds into it.
Yeah, just like this podcast.
Yeah, precisely, just like this podcast. And you can also see it in the American society. Like following 24's Jack Bauer, I remember hearing this incident. It was I don't remember if it was the cadets training or the officers training, what was it, and in which branch of the American military it was. But the story goes that they had a trainer who had a whole class of upcoming, military officers, young guys there. He was asking from them that like, is it okay to torture in order to get information? And the whole class just answered that, yeah, it's completely fine. And when asked, like, why, they just answered that because Jack Bauer does it on 24.
Oh, Jesus.
And this was such of a bad example that trainer then and the military, US military, felt that it was necessary to get a video message from the producers of 24 and Kiefer Sutherland, where they directly state that Jack Bauer is a fictional character and what he does on screen is not real life, and no real life policies and attitudes should be drawn from what a fictional character does. And Kiefer Sutherland made this video message, and one of the two producers also recorded it. But the other producer felt that, nope, not gonna make that clarification. None at all. And stayed absolutely quiet on the matter. So, from that point, like you said, when you started like our discussion and when you started with the problematic elements of these movies, yeah, like the media we consume unfortunately has quite a strong effect on at least how some of us see the world around us. And because of that, you presented the question like, is it enough that there's a anti-fascist subtext running in Judge Dredd and running in Dredd comics? And will people pick that subtext, or will they just look at the surface level text? Like I said, I wanna believe to the man next to me that he will see past the subtext, he will see past the surface text and read the subtext. But as the bloody word seems to be hell-bent on, convincing me or proving to me, it's not given, unfortunately.
No, it's not given, and even if we sometimes think that we are more intelligent, even though we consume a lot of TV and media, that we would see past all these things, unfortunately we are not always that intelligent, and, well, I guess even less intelligent than you might think if you look at the political situation around the world these days, if that's anything to go by.
And, the same also applies to me. I have given readings of films in this podcast where they haven't perhaps been the most in-depth and most stellar analysis every single time. There have been movies that I have later on come back to and realized, oh yeah, there is also this level and this reading that can be taken from this given film, and oh boy, I really should have said this when we were doing an episode.
Yeah, so that's still kind of up in the air about the whole fascism, but with that in mind, going into our quickies, quickfire, not at all quickfire questions, what worked?
I like the world depicted. I don't like the world, but I like the look and the feel of the world in these films. I like the megacity being presented in both films for the duration that we actually spend in the megacity. Both of these movies actually has surprisingly little of the city itself. 1995 is mostly on a desert, and 2012 is inside one high rise. And in a way, I like that tone that these movies have. Most definitely I do like it in 2012. I partially like it in 1995. I do think that 1995, it's kind of a mixed bag. In many ways, I don't appreciate the comedic tone of the 1995 film. I most definitely hate Rob Schneider, but then again, partly I also do like the comedic tone of the 1995 film. I do think that it, much like Joel Schumacher's Batman movies, where I don't like Batman and Robin, but Batman Forever. I do think it kind of manages to tap into the more comedic aspect of the comic book source material. And I do think that at times 1995 Dredd does the same thing, because Judge Dredd comics are not always super serious and heartbreaking. At some times they are just downright parodies.
I'm with you on the aesthetics of the 1995 film, but on the other hand, if I would contribute on to what didn't work, it's also the aesthetics in a different way. Yeah, maybe Dredd is just that the character wants you to be uncomfortable by putting us in these crossroads, being a paradox, but then what to do with that feeling? Like, if it were only a parody, then that would be one thing. But then, inevitably, we land on this fascist power fantasy, especially very much in the movies, and not just a critique of the whole fascist power fantasies. So, what are we to make of it? And what are we to make of aestheticizing the violence? So that's my problem with the aesthetics on that side of the coin. Is it fair to leave the audience looking for the answers by themselves? Because I think the makers of these films had the ethical responsibility to throw us a bit of a bone here. And since it doesn't in my books, this still feeds a narrative, I think, to most minds that kind of indulges in the fascist fantasy more than it interrogates it anyway.
That is kind of like, you always hear this statement that movies shouldn't underestimate the audiences. The audiences are not stupid. But unfortunately, X number of times the audiences really are stupid. So it comes a tricky question, exactly how much you should leave to the audience's interpretation, and just trust that the audience, gets your whole point, and how much you should actually, like you said, throw a bone to the audience. I mean, looking at 1995 version, I can't be fucking certain that is that movie really anti-fascist, or is it not? Or is Stallone actually glamorizing a fascist police state? Like, really?
Yeah, I can guarantee you that 95% of the moviegoers who go see these two movies, they are not thinking about fascism or authoritarianism in their brain when they leave the theater and the credits roll. What they got out of the movie is something like, that was fun. And then that whole story, that the elements keep resonating in their brain.
After all, we talk about, political messaging and violent behavior in movies. Stallone, I don't know if you ever seen Stallone's Cobra.
I think not.
Yeah, it's an not groundbreaking actioner that actually stops the whole action at one point, or stops kind of not mid-chase, but almost mid-chase. For Stallone to have a whole Dirty Harry, was it now 5-esque dialogue exchange, how, basically cops should be able to just kill criminals on the street because there's a revolving door policy going on in the courts where the judges ruling over the court of law are so actually weak and spineless that it's basically just like a free walk back to home day for all the criminals. So coming from like for example from Cobra and seeing the bafflingly fucked ending of the 1995 film, I like I said, I honestly I don't know if Sylvester Stallone is actually championing for fascist policies.
Like, yeah, the tagline of Cobra, I just looked it up. Crime is a disease, meet the cure.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you kind of wonder sometimes when you really put it into this framing that we've done in this episode. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, like in Cobra, what we are doing, we are demonizing some minorities, and most especially we are demonizing the critics of police brutality and the mass media. Cobra also being a movie which has the scene where one limp-dicked reporter dares to come to Stallone's character and ask, like, did you really have to shoot? And kill the armed robber at the grocery store, and Stallone just like grabs him from his tie and pushes his nose on a bleeding wound of some innocent civilian that robber had killed during the store robbery. And he's like, present your questions to him, pointing at the dead body. So, at least partly, like, that's what we are doing here.
Yeah. Describe Judge Dredd movies in one word.
That is a hard one, because there is a lot of adjectives to throw at these movies. At the end of the day, I use the word contradictionary. It's a term that very heavily relies on my reading of the 2012 movie. I do feel that there's a contradiction between 1995 and 2012, which I still take an anti-fascist reading from. And most definitely I do think that there is a contradiction between 1995 and the comics. So there you go, contradictory. That's my word for these films.
Yeah, as far as I know, that was the word that was floating in my head as well, so I'm just gonna go with that and steal it, or whatever, make what you want of it. Contradictory. By the way, why is there military-grade murder bot that is lying dormant in a closet and then is just taken into use? Anyway, it just appears.
Well, why do people... Well, quick question to the American audience. Why do people collect or sort firearms and teach them to the kids? I don't know. Or, a global question. Why do people actually take tourist trips to, countries that have an actual war going on? The whole dark tourism phenomena. I don't know. There is something in us, I guess, which... some type of a fascination towards the darker subject matters and darker things. So... from that perspective, I can kind of see a lone collector having a murder bot in his closet. Actually, coming from a murder bot, another question, why does the Justice Department allow such of a weak deactivation process, which is just, loosening a couple of wires that basically... anyone who has ever seen an electrical wire can automatically also reactivate the said murder bot. Like the deactivation processes for firearms in today's world are much more complicated and stricter than what apparently is the deactivation process for a murder bot here.
Complete the sentence. You really know you're watching Judge Dredd movies when...
You really know you're watching Judge Dredd movies when your friendly neighborhood grandpa Fascist gives you a heartwarming speech about how he so values freedom and then gives you a 15-year sentence in an isolation cube simply for wanting a bloody democracy in this society.
You really know you're watching Judge Dredd films when the implication of raping a corpse is where the limit goes for a fascist judge. Also, one good question also, like why, after supposedly K dealing with judges for years, he forgets this key fact and gets blasted villain IQ 2. Well, did you, Henrik, like these films?
I do. Even the 1995 version, even though I do have an extremely large bone to pick with it. Or I don't actually know. I like 2012. I like that.
Yeah.
Very much, thank you. 1995. I have to come back to this question in the form of the next question. I'm gonna pass on 1995 for just a few seconds.
Yeah, like this is more of a fitting answer to the next question on my part. But let's not go with the blunt instrument answer quite yet here. Let's give a more nuanced one here in the would you recommend the film, Henrik? Or films?
I do recommend 2012. I think that's a well put together actioner, has a nice, gritty, dark attitude. I do like the brutal violence that it presents. I do know people who to whom it's way too violent. I have tried to show it to some of my friends, and they have asked me to stop the film because it's just so violent that they
really
don't want to see it. Yeah, yeah. With one of my friends, we didn't get further than the hotshot scene in the beginning of the movie. It already was like
it's all PG-13 stuff behind the camera. Anyway,
yeah. Well, it's you know not under 18 in Finland.
Yeah, suggested violence more.
I don't know. 2012 does have.
Well,
yeah. A lot of it does have a fair amount of on-screen violence. It has quite a lot of suggested violence.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about 1995 and not showing us putting the guy into several pieces by the robot moment.
Yeah, that was one of the demanded cuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, most definitely a recommendation to 2012. 1995. Well, I passed on the question, did I like it? I guess in some way I do like the 1995 version. Would I recommend it? You remember when we did one of the earliest episodes that we ever did? We did the Big Lebowski.
Episode 2.
Yeah. And when we came into the session there, we were both prepared for the opinion that we would not recommend the Big Lebowski. Then we talked about the movie in course of that episode, and then we both ended up recommending it.
Yeah.
Dredd 1995 is kind of the opposite.
Okay.
I came to today's session with the pre-mindset that I would recommend the film. I would acknowledge its faults. I would acknowledge that I do hate Rob Schneider. I do acknowledge that we spent way too little time in Mega City 1 and that its message and what it wants to say is extremely muddled. But then I would still recommend it, and I would say that I like it. But now that we have been talking about it, I don't know. Like I guess I'm not gonna recommend it. And even like me liking it has taken a severe hit in the course of our discussion, because I come to realize that I just can't get past that fucking ending. The movie deciding to celebrate the moment when the word of Judge Dredd reinforces the status quo, ignores the whole Rico thing as just a one accidental fluke in the system that otherwise apparently has no faults. Ferg is still most likely going to prison unless the whole society's mysteriously changed while nobody was looking behind the screens. and the crime rate still going on, and everybody just being like, oh yeah, this is a fucking victory for us, even though, in my opinion, the ending should be a Robocop tier tragedy. Like, in Robocop, yeah, Robocop says that his name is Murphy, but he's still a slave to that programming. At the end of Judge Dredd, the whole society is still slave to the tyrannical rule of the judges, but everybody is now cheering and applauding. I just hate that. I'm willing to forgive so much to the film. I'm willing to even stomach Rob Schneider, which is a tall order, believe me, but I just can't get past the ending. So, absolutely no recommendation. And I like it in some sense. There's a kind of a certain type of a soft bubble that I wanna give to the film and wrap it inside of it. And inside of that bubble, I would like it. But as a whole, I like aspects of it. But I hate that bloody ending from the bottom of my heart. I half like it, and I absolutely won't recommend it. I recommend the comics though. Like, read the essentials. Read every single comic where Dredd makes certain that democracy does not happen. Because it won.
Yeah. Yeah, safer bet. 1995 already discussed that it's tonally goofy. We have this stoicism of Stallone that doesn't really help the comedy vibes either way. It might be even making it worse. There is a romantic subplot that comes out of nowhere, something that I really didn't touch upon yet. But yeah, it comes out of nowhere, and Sylvester's character is typically wooden and then smooch in the end, coming out of nowhere. And as another random point, all this Rob Schneider shenanigans, and with lines that really don't follow any boundaries in jokes, even like this whole corpse fucking joke. We don't have time for this.
Where was the corpse fucking joke?
Well, that's how I took it. It's the moment when I think one of them shoots the bad guy in the changing room, and then Sylvester Stallone is starting to take off the guy's clothes, and then Rob Schneider goes, hey, we don't have time for this. So I took it that he's suggesting that in Rob Schneider's world, that's corpse fucking time.
I forgot that. Does he shoot him or does he just punch him?
One or the other.
One or the other, yeah. Corpse fucking or rape.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even remember that scene.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, these jokes just most of the time totally not working. 2012, something that I didn't mention. Well, something that might be a problem with both movies, more of a problem in the 2012. I had a same costume confusion. Everyone is wearing the same Judge Dredd visors, so you get frequent visual confusion at the end, especially. Even Dredd, he looks like one of the baddies half of the time in that scene where they're fighting off. But yeah, something more substantial and more overallish. Yeah, got it. 1995, totally all over the place. I did enjoy the aesthetics like you did in the set design, and I kind of did enjoy that flying scene, flying to safety, flying to, whatever the barrier they were about to go through before they talk about corpse fucking. It was pretty to look at, even though there's a weird continuity problem with around those parts as well when they're on the outside on the rocks. It's a rushed film. It's stylistically all over the place. The 2012 version is more coherent, but then it's also less. It has less of a personality, I thought, in the character of Judge Dredd. But the ending had something more to say. It had a little bit more going on when it comes to what I believe to be the themes that Judge Dredd in the comics would like to be displayed a bit. But still, I think the makers of the 2012 version had a responsibility to go a little bit further, do the series some justice. But I cannot put myself into the position of recommending either one of these films because they are both so clearly and obviously lacking. You're just looking at some of these scenes with Stallone and Schneider and you're like, oh god, even when filming they must have known that this is not gonna be a good movie.
Then again, you mentioned the costumes in... and to actually finally get some peace of mind with 1995. I like the costumes a hell of a lot. Gianni Versace, who Stallone himself brought to design them, and I don't know if Stallone understood what Versace was doing. I don't know if Gianni Versace himself knew what he was doing with the costumes, but here comes. 1995, the costumes have those extremely gigantic shoulder pieces, which in the film are presented as some type of a bulletproof vest contraption, which is completely impractical and won't actually defend your body at all. And more specifically, it has that's like that cockpiece thing, which is enormous. And I do think that when it comes to, like, we were talking about the possibility of an anti-fascist message being in there. I do think, actually, that is the one area where 1995, intentionally or unintentionally, manages to have an anti-fascist core. Because, as already mentioned, like Dredd is a fascist, the Justice Department is a fascist dictatorship. But as the costumes present to you through the cockpiece, what in the end are fascists, except small dick losers trying to desperately, through uniforms and other prop material, prove to you that they have a larger dicks than they have.
Yeah.
So, there it is. I don't know. I don't know if anybody ever actually intended this for the film, but fuck, I find enough symbolism in that one aspect in 1995 that I can say that I like the film. Won't recommend it still, though. Fuck no. No, stay away. But goddamn, I can rewatch it someday. Thanks, Versace.
Gotta be sure that the continuation of the family tree is secured in fascist circles as well. With that giant protective...
It's the only place that no judge can actually take a bullet. Like goddamn, that bulletproof vest, it doesn't protect anything in your body. You can take like a 15 million shots to your torso with zero protection. But your balls are being protected by Kevlar. That's the only thing that matters. These goddamn dumbasses.
Yeah. I guess we have covered 1995 Judge Dredd and the remake of Die Hard.
How did you land on Die Hard?
We have a high-rise building which is full of terrorists. That's about it.
True that. The other film it's usually being contrasted against is Rage Redemption, which actually has the exact same plot, like trucking being in the upper floor of a high-rise building, and the cops are trapped inside and have to fight their way to the penthouse floor to make an arrest in order to save their lives. The notion there being that Dredd, it came, if I remember this correctly, it came out after Raid. However, it had entered production before Raid came out. And therefore, like Dredd 2012 wouldn't be a copycat of Raid Redemption, which is an accusation that often is presented against the film.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the Raid Redemption 2011.
Okay, in that case, came out the exact same year. So, but yeah. Knowing how long film productions take, I would say there is no chance that Dredd 2012 could have actually copied Red Redemption's homework and just decided like the production design, the production decision, it couldn't have had the time to be like, oh hey, they are making this Red Redemption movie, let's just copy it and just copy paste Judge Dredd all over it and call it with a different name. Can't be done. Seeing how slow movie productions are.
Speaking of homework, you've been busy with homework and delivering all of these great ideas for what to discuss in this podcast. There's still a couple to go if you want to continue on that vein. Because I'm still waiting for the needle in the wheel of names to start pointing at Pirates of the Caribbean.
Well, we can just jump into Pirates of the Caribbean if you really wanna say that kind of a shitfest of a trilogy so badly.
Well, at least the Wheel of Fortune still actively hates Pirates of the Caribbean, so shall we just go to Pirates of the Caribbean?
Well, yeah, let's go to Pirates of the Caribbean. Coming up next.
Yeah. Whippy. See you next time.
But I maintain it's just the first 3 films. I refuse to touch upon 4 and 5.
Why? Are you not a masochist?
Not that level of.
Okay, well,
like with the original trilogy, we still have some type of a running theme, or not theme, but we share a director and the main cast, so there's some continuation. But like with the later parts, there's absolutely nothing.
There's a lot of bad CGI.
Yeah, and that's a franchise that goes off the rails so quickly that you don't want to cover the whole franchise even for the pleasure of seeing all the films.
I had trouble staying up watching the 4th part, I believe. I don't know why I was there, but
it was the Fountain of Youth thing, wasn't it?
Was it the Tentacle Guy finale thing?
Wasn't Tentacle Guy in the original trilogy?
Oh, could be. Well, it's probably the film that I hate very much.
Well, most likely it's somewhere in the Pirates of the Caribbean. Most likely, if you really hate it, it's going to be in the original trilogy.
Yay!
Because we are not lucky enough, to avoid seeing the most hated or the worst films in any franchise.
Gosh darn it! I tried to make you excited for the other sequels, but. Okay, this time then.
I'm excited for the first one. That I remember liking quite much. And then a whole bunch of movies happened after that.
I would only assume that we're gonna destroy all those memories in the next one.
Most likely. That's how this podcast usually goes.
See you.
Until then.